You've seen it and I haven't. What do you know about it?
Quantum Tempest is the name. And as in usual Mike Madden organ files methodology, it's a rip-roaring, fast-paced, technologically full of odd stuff, and just really rips along. So, Mike writes with jet fuel. I always joke, and so it's just in that same vein. If you like his other organ files books, I think.
Great, I'm glad to know that. If you are just joining us, remote viewers, we're waiting for Jack, who will be arriving in about 15 minutes from the airport. So Dirk Cussler and I are chatting. Thank you for joining us. Mike first came to my attention writing books under just for himself, and he was writing about drones. Did any of you read Mike's earlier books? Because they were great. Okay, do you agree? I really like them, and he obviously really understands a lot of the hardware. So when it's been a circuitous route with various of the co-authors. Well, the only one who's really stuck is Graham and you.
That's true. Yeah, Mike wrote with Tom Clancy, so kind of unusual, I guess, somebody who wrote Clancy and Cussler. I mean, that's kind of a pretty good combo, I guess. From
well, Clancy, I think, is more hardware than Cussler, yeah. But it's sort of fun to read a Clive book that has more hardware, so to speak. And you're right, he does Mike is very jet propelled.
Yeah, and he's always looking ahead too. This one deals a lot with AI, which obviously is a popular topic with fiction right now. But yeah, he delves into that in a lot of interesting ways. So,
all right. So I hope somebody in the audience will be sophisticated enough to discuss AI with Mike when he comes here, because it's certainly not going to be me. Wow. But you're right. It's certainly something that thriller writers are going to have to increasingly grapple with, and particularly as the nature of even warfare is changing.
Right. And as authors, too, we have to grapple with it, right? As all our rights
right.
and everything get
So speaking of authors, what's up with you?
Well, I've got a Dirk Pitt in the can, just because of a variety of reasons. Normally, the publisher likes to put the Pitt out in the fall and November
right.
As kind of a Pitt for Christmas. And didn't quite make the timeline didn't work out, so that's why Mike is slotted there. And as a result of that, they actually want to hold the book until next November. So got the manuscript sitting there, it's all done and ready to go, but they'd rather publish it in November of next year. So at this point, Grant Brown's working on Enuma Files, and he's going to be finishing that pretty shortly. So I think that's going to be slated for June of next year. We've got Mike in November. Mine will be in November, and I think that's what we got at least on track right now for next year. But yeah, unfortunately, Pitt readers have to wait a bit. Sorry about that.
Wow, there was a really big thing called a Christie for Christmas that went on forever when Agatha, but I didn't realize a Cussler for Christmas was a thing. That's fascinating. And I can understand that in the sense of holiday sales and all, but there's so many really big books that come out in the fall. Your dad's books used to come out all over the place. I mean, sometimes it was March, often it was Memorial Day.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's the other sort of big market I think they shoot for is Father's Day, I guess, in June. So those are kind of the big prime ones. And for whatever reason, I guess they prefer to put Pitt, I guess, as maybe the flagship, I guess, in November, I guess, the bigger market. So
here's an egg for me. If you've already finished this book, I hope you're writing the new book,
well,
so we won't have to wait for 2 years.
Hopefully it'll give me time to get ahead for a change. Yeah, I'm fooling around right now. I haven't actually put pen to paper just yet, but I've been kicking around some ideas and trying to get a plot started.
So you're finding yourself that your dad and I, because Clive and I had this discussion after he finished Trojan Odyssey, we went out to dinner, and he talked to me about the fact that he didn't think he could continue to write such big books with so much research and everything all on his own. I'm trying to think. How old was Clive? When was that? Because I'm older now than Clive was when that happened.
He was about 75, I think.
Oh God, he was
thereabouts.
so young, and he said that. That's very annoying. But anyway, and he wondered what I thought about that, and I encouraged him because I could certainly see that the original books weren't all that big. If you go back and look at the size of, early Cusslers. In fact, early Cusslers, the first one was a paperback original, if I remember.
Yeah, Mediterranean Caper was
Right.
the first. And
So it was necessarily fairly small, and then they kept growing into these, enormous books. So you're now finding out that your dad wasn't fooling around when he said how hard it was to do one on your own.
Not at all. No, it's a challenge, and of course it's just more so because there's so many titles that collectively we've all written under his name. And one thing I wanted to point out: this book, if I have my numbers right, is actually the 100th Clive Cussler book in print.
Is it really?
Yeah, if you can believe
I
that.
didn't count.
So it's pretty remarkable, but also pretty challenging for us trying to come up with new
100
stories and new
books.
titles.
Wow. Wow. So somewhere, did any of you come to the Arizona Biltmore for Clive's 80th birthday party that we gave him?
Is that where he took him to the museum?
No, that was a different one. It was actually at the Biltmore. But we, the family and I and Clive, anyway, we put together a slideshow of, remember that? It was wonderful.
awesome.
And I still have it on a stick. So I'm thinking that, well, it's too late for the moment. It would have been actually very good. Well, not with Jack Late. It wouldn't have worked out. But if we plan ahead, maybe we could redo, revisit that whole slideshow.
That'd be great. One thing.
You have one too. I gave you one.
Yeah, I've got that.
Right.
And I've been bugging the publisher, and I don't know if they're going to do anything with it, but next year will be the 50th anniversary of Raise the Titanic.
Ah.
And I'm really hoping they'll do a special edition or at least a re-release of some sort. So maybe we could do something.
That
with
would be
a
that
little
would
nice
be
little
great, wouldn't it?
Commemorative event or something, perhaps.
I mean, it's I still see and hear him all the time because I spent so much time with him. Obviously, Dirk way more than I did, and it brings him back to life to watch that and to remember. Like many people as they age, Clive paid in part with his body for all of the things he did when he was younger and
Adventurous, yes.
yes. Well, and I think generally speaking, men are harder on their bodies than women are, although maybe not anymore now that, we're all in the military and stuff. But you can really see watching the slideshow about all the great stuff he did and why his 80s were hard for him.
Yeah, it's true. Just I don't know, got me thinking of the pictures and all, and talking about Raise the Titanic. But if I can just make another plug for the Clive Cussler Collector Society as a group, probably a lot of you are familiar with, some more so than others in the audience here. They're having their annual convention in Charleston, South Carolina, in October. And that's celebrating the 30th anniversary of Clive's discovery of the Hunley. And
Wow.
so just another kind of momentous occasion, I guess, in his career that beyond the books of kind of, fun stuff that he got involved with. And,
And Charleston's the perfect location to have that.
yeah, it's a great city.
That's wonderful. I don't know if I ever told you, but my husband and I signed up for the first commercial cruise of the Northwest Passage. It was like 2016 or 2017, I can't remember, on Crystal, which then went bankrupt during COVID. But we went from Seward, Alaska. We went down and around Alaska, across the Bering Sea, over the top of Canada, all the way to Greenland, and then back down the East Coast to, trying to remember, Boston or New York or something. But anyway, they really knocked themselves out. Actually, it was really funny. They had an actual ice cutter that went ahead of the cruise ship. We never saw any ice. One poor little polar bear. I mean, if you're polar order was a thing. But anyway, they had a lot of really distinguished, scientists on board, and almost all of them knew Clive. So I spent a fair amount of time on this cruise, sitting around talking to all these guys that worked in museums, and they worked, they were really very distinguished. But your dad was kind of like a lodestone for them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he was in the Explorers Club, and I think there's certainly a lot of scientists and explorers in that too. So I think he did interact with a lot of people. I mean, he did the Sea Hunters books and then a TV show, and he worked with some big archaeologists with Noah. And so, yeah, he had a pretty wide reach, knew and influenced a lot of people, no doubt.
Well, you used to go off and sail with him, looking for the Bonhomme Richard off Whitby, England, or whatever
That's
it
right,
was,
yeah,
right?
Yorkshire
I know.
Coast, yeah.
Did you, I always felt kind of sad that he never found it.
Yeah, me too. And I've made plenty of trips over there as well with trying to continue that search, and it's really one that's been tough. On all of us.
You and I did a program here one time without Clive in which we had visuals. I guess you had taken. So maybe we can find those too for, whatever this is going to be. But I remember seeing the two of you and other people in the boat,
Yeah, I mean, we've had, I hate to count, it's probably at least 15 expeditions over there gosh, I mean, that was 1978, 1979. That's when he first got involved with hunting for shipwrecks. Right. Is he'd come across a group that he'd read a little blurb in the paper that they were searching for John Paul Jones's ship over in the North Sea. And he contacted them and gotten involved, and that was really the start of Numa. And even though he's found all these other ships along the way, all the years, the first one was the one that we first started looking for, and still remains unfound. So. Well,
it was a wooden ship. Is there much chance that it actually has survived? Because some of the old wooden ships, like the Vasa in Scotland, or was it the Mary Rose or the Mary Celeste?
Mary Rose in Portsmouth, I think.
Right.
That's right.
And so, as I understand it, they have to keep seawater refreshing those ships, or they would. Have any of you been to Stockholm to the Vasa Museum? I mean, it's one of the great museums of the whole world, but the Sweden was the world power in the early 1600s, and they hired a Dutch shipbuilder, a Dutch, there must be a more distinguished word, but designer, whatever, anyway. And he built one of those tall ships, and it was super tall, like you see if you've looked at like Nelson's ships and other stuff where they have, the ships are thin, they're very tall. Anyway, they launched the ship, and it sailed out into the harbor of Stockholm, rolled right over, went to the bottom. That was it. And they finally dredged it up sometime.
And kind of like the same thing that happened to the Hunley is it became buried in the mud there because it was in a harbor and a lot of
Right.
silt, which served to protect it. So
Right.
when they came back hundreds of years later and excavated it, they found the wood in excellent condition. And it is an amazing museum. If anybody goes to Stockholm, it is just
It really is.
blows your mind. I mean, it is 400-year-old ship.
You
is
made it.
Still there.
Hi.
Hey,
Come
all
and
right.
join us.
Hug first. Hello, you were wonderful.
I'm so glad to see you. We've been having a little
Good.
trawl.
I had to tap dance and tell jokes, so I think I'm not done now, so I'll turn it over.
Yay, your taxi driver was right on time.
I just told you, Mario Andretti, the guy was great.
I know, I love it. So fortunately, we were all worried that, the haboob or, similar storm would come in and prevent you from landing, but it all worked out. So Dirk says, and maybe you've done, is this the actual 100th Cussler?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Is it really? Oh, booyah. Look at me go.
So Jack.
And this is actually my 20th novel.
Is it?
Yeah.
A double anniversary.
Yep.
A round of applause, everybody. Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's wild.
It has been. But, originally you were not writing Isaac Bell. What were you writing?
Well, for the Cusslers or?
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I
originally-
know. I didn't mean your own books.
My own books was a geologist named Philip Mercer.
Right.
Kind of a Indiana Jones type character. And then I had done 6 of those when Clive gave me the best phone call of my life. And it was out of the blue. I remember I was just getting back from running errands, and this is the days of the answering machines and landlines. And the answering machine had just clicked off. And so I hit the button, and he goes, Clive, or Jack, it's Clive Cussler. I'm like, he said, I want to, can you give me a call? I got something to talk to you about. I'm like, oh. So I dial him back, and I go, Clive, it's Jack DuBrul. I was screening my phone calls, and you didn't make the cut. He didn't miss a beat. He goes, I get that all the time. Don't worry about it. So he invited me to do the Oregon Files, which I believe I did 7 of those books. Had a lot of fun with it, but I was ready to go back to my Mercer character. And so I did another Mercer book, and then Clive, again, called me up, actually through the agents this time, said, would I be interested in writing the Isaac Bell series? And I'd read a couple of them. It wasn't quite my thing. It really wasn't a big history fiction buff. And so I told my agent to just tell them that I'm not interested at all. And my agent said, well, Jack, just think about it for a couple of days. Don't be rash. I'm like, all right. Mm-hmm. So
I bet he did.
Yeah.
Right, Jack, are you serious?
Oh, yeah. My agent loved those paychecks, I guaranteed. So I did more research into what Justin Scott had done with the character in the stories. And he kind of jumped around all over the first part of the 20th century. So I was thinking, like, what interesting things were going on at that point in time. And I don't know how it ever just popped in my head. And then the book instantly wrote itself. So, well, that's when the Titanic sank. And I thought, oh, God, could I somehow kind of a book? And so I came up with the whole plot. Basically, the book's already written in my head. When I called Clive directly, and I pitched the idea to him, and he was furious at himself for not thinking of it earlier. He said it was such a clever idea. And so, off I go doing Isaac Bell. And I hadn't told him at the time, but I planned on doing just one book. Just kind of a lark, kind of a fun thing to do. But I really did enjoy writing it. As I was working on it, I was sitting on my back deck. There's a rainstorm. And my house backs up against a real thick section of woods. And it kind of reminded me of a jungle. And I thought, Isaac Bell's never been in a jungle, I don't think. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going on jungly around this time period? And so, well, they're digging the Panama Canal. I said, Isaac Bell, they'll do something with the Panama Canal. I said, boom, that book. I'm like, okay, well, Clive, I got another idea. And then as I was working on that, and again, that's going to be my last book. I'm just going to do the 2, and then I'm out of the whole thing. And then I was thinking about things, history at that point in time. And I came up with the tagline in my head that Isaac Bell was on the Lusitania when it was torpedoed, and he's the reason the Germans had to torpedo it. There's another book. So I keep roping myself into this. But it's been a lot of fun. Now, this particular book is actually 30 years in the making. Why I say that is back in the early 80s or mid-80s, when Tom Clancy published The Hunt for Red October, and the techno thriller was born. And people really liked all the details and the technology and the strategies, and they liked that minutia of it. And I really thought the idea of a techno thriller set in World War I, because it was the first industrialized war, and I thought it would be just an interesting thing to do. And I never worked with it until slowly, I guess, I was building up to Isaac Bell and my character of going to Europe during World War I, and I get to write my World War I techno thriller. Thanks, Dirk.
So you skipped over last year's book,
Oh.
which is one of my total favorites, and we were talking before you came. Who knew that the Federal Reserve System was going to come back into the spotlight?
Right?
I mean, it's almost uncanny, the fact that, these events you're writing about are, suddenly topical.
It is. Yep.
Yeah, I loved that book. I thought there was so much in it that I was saying to everybody before you came that most of us would never even think about.
It was funny because that book, I came up with a title. I never come up with titles. Usually, my titles never even get published. But it said an Isaac Bell book, The Heist. I thought, it's a good title for a detective novel. And then so okay, what is going to get stolen? And my idea was Bell going to have to be blackmailed into stealing something, or was he have to stop someone from stealing something, or have to go after something that got stolen? And so I was doing research as, what was something big at this time period that was really worth a novel. I'm like, oh, God, the entire, cash supply of the United States is being minted as we speak during this. There's The Heist right there.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. Jekyll Island. You
Yep.
have to go
Oh,
visit
yeah,
it sometime. Right, fascinating. So, in Clive's books, generally the character, well, maybe all of them, I think, has to have some sort of institutional support. Something
Yep.
or other. I mean, we have Numa, or, we have the Oregon and all of
Right.
that, whatever. So the Van Dorn agency, and I can't remember, this is embarrassing, but I didn't look it up. Did Justin come up with that?
No, that was all Clive.
Was it?
Yep, that was the original. The book was called The Chase.
Okay.
And he didn't get much into any of the detectives in the firm at that time, but Clive did create the Van Dorn agency, and I think the boss, whose name is now completely eluding me, unfortunately.
I can't remember either. Dirk, help. Right.
Thank you, Joseph Van Dorn.
Okay.
But Justin did come up with a lot of the other characters that are in the various offices
Okay.
around the country.
So it's hard not to think of the Pinkerton Agency as, I mean, and there's a lot of books actually have been various genres have used the Pinkerton Agency, particularly Kate, I can't think of her last name, but she was like a female, Pinkerton agent.
Okay. Because they did have one back in the 1800s, a female agent, yeah.
Yeah, and they had a big role in the Civil War
Yep.
and moving forward. So it seems kind of logical that Isaac Bell, instead of being a government employee or a spy
Yep.
or whatever, would actually work for the Van Dorn Agency.
For the private sector.
But the Pinkerton Agency had an outsized role in working with the government
Yeah.
and so forth. So the Van Dorn Agency, it's not surprising, would be doing the same thing.
Very much modeled after them, with the distinction that I'm pretty sure Clive put it in one of the books, or maybe it was Justin did, that they would never break up a strike. Because Pinkerton was famous for strike breakers.
Yeah,
They'd
they
send in
were.
a bunch of, basically, it was a private army, and they could do with impunity what they wanted. And I think it was Clive that said they'll never break up a strike.
Okay, so there goes that plot line.
Yeah,
for you.
exactly.
Too bad, Jack.
Right.
We'll have to get Dirk to keep you straight on that one. So when I read your book, I've actually sailed into Liverpool.
Oh,
twice.
really?
Oh, yeah. There's Dirk will tell you, there's almost nowhere. I'm finally going to India, but the last frontier, there's a river trip that we're going to take in India, and it'll be the last sort of subcontinent or any place I haven't been.
Wow.
I know. So when I was reading the opening scene here of...
You recognized
I
it then.
did,
Oh,
yeah.
that's fantastic.
And the other thing is, and I was saying before you came, that you know for sure that if he's escorting a shipment of gold from the U.S. to the UK, it's not going to go well
Oh, of course not.
when you land. So
Well, it's fun when I was doing research. Again, I love the research of the time period, and I just assumed that ships were still sailing into Southampton like they had been before the war. But the British government had pretty much taken over all the docks in Southampton to bring men and material to the continent, and all the ocean liners are now going into Liverpool. So I'm like, okay, I have them coming to Liverpool. I knew nothing about the city, so I was again researching about that, and I discovered there's a thing called a transporter bridge, which was the two tall towers with cables to go between them. And rather than a continuous roadbed, it had a platform that crossed back and forth over the river with cars and trucks on top of it. And I discovered this thing, I got to have an action scene. I can't blow it up. I'm going to have to do something with it. So
no, that's too bad. I thought you might drop the whole thing into the river.
I looked into it.
Right. And today, the thing is today, the British have really gone in for wind power. And so that whole approach to Liverpool now, it's all, the,
Windmills, really?
Yeah, right. And so it would be completely unrecognizable, for these guys. But yeah, Liverpool is a huge port.
Yeah.
And didn't the Titanic sail out of Liverpool?
Southampton.
It did?
Yep.
Well, some of it was
Because it's closer to London. That's why they get the train right in.
But there was some other major ship that actually sailed out of Liverpool. I can't remember what it was.
The Lusitania was headed towards Liverpool when she was.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's what I was thinking about. It was also very big in the slave trade, but
Really?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Very big. Right. And Bristol on the coast of England was the liquor trade. I mean,
Okay.
Bristol, Harvey's Bristol cream
Yeah.
sherry, right? Remember that? Because so much of, especially in the 18th century, they would bring the liquor up from Madeira and the Canaries
Yep.
and Spain. And for whatever reason, Bristol was the heavy port for
Wow.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the Thames is not an ocean port. You have to go up and come down
Yeah.
the river,
Yep.
and so Bristol being on the water, on the Atlantic,
Yep.
and Liverpool on the Atlantic, and Southampton.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. I'm giving you ideas for new books.
You
so.
never know.
I wonder if they're still shipping all that booze into England. That's an interesting point.
don't know.
Maybe another heist.
I don't know. Yeah, there we go.
Right, which would be great. So anyway, Isaac gets there with this very odd bridge, but gold is super heavy. So, did they have to make any arrangements for this transporter bridge with that kind of a load on it?
I didn't have that much gold, I don't think. I don't remember. Because again, it's stolen, and I don't think they're planning
Maybe it
on
was
that
a
way out.
small amount of
Yeah.
gold then. Okay.
Because again, the transporter bridge is designed for I think 30 or 40 cars. I mean, it was a big platform.
All right.
So-
Well, anyway, so they land
Yep.
and indeed things don't go super well, but they survive.
Yes.
So what next? What is Isaac? He gets a telegram probably.
Yeah, he's asked by President Wilson because they've had dealings in the past, especially during the book The Heist, that Wilson had kept the United States out of the war, but he knows with unrestricted submarine warfare returning one more time, the chances of another American ship being sunk by the Germans is very high, and we will probably end up in the war. And so he asked Isaac Bell to give him an honest assessment, not from a military man's point of view, but of just a person who's seen action, but doesn't necessarily want to go to war, to give him an honest assessment of what the troops are going to face if they do end up in the battlefields of Europe. And so he goes off, actually ends up meeting, as a little cameo, Ian Fleming's father, who was a soldier in World War I and actually sadly killed just a few weeks after the events of this story. And Isaac Bell ends up in the front lines in all kinds of crazy shenanigans, as he always tends to find himself in.
So we in 1916?
1917.
Oh, so
Yep.
earlier
Yep.
in 17.
This
'Cause
is
when
March
did we
1917.
Okay, when did we declare war in 17? Was it
It
April?
was April.
So
April
it's right
4th
before.
or 5th. Yeah, it was right. It was just before.
So Wilson was still compos mentis at this
Yes.
point,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If you all know your history, Woodrow Wilson had, was it a stroke?
Stroke. Massive stroke.
And his wife ran the country, only nobody really knew it. It's kind of, once again, with all the
Yeah.
conversation about Biden, who
Right.
know, everything seems to come around again. But anyway, so that's something you'll have to face if, Isaac goes on with Wilson.
With
At
Wilson,
some
yeah.
point, he won't actually be going on
Because
with Wilson.
at some point, I'd like to do something with the Versailles Treaty and all the negotiations that went on for the armistice at the end of the war. Have some plot line in there. So I'm still working there.
Well, we'll talk because it's actually, I love it, the fact that the Versailles Treaty is actually like a complete reprise of the Congress of Vienna,
Yep.
which met in 1815 to settle the Napoleonic War.
Right.
And, it's like 100 years later, it's almost like
The
a
exact
mirror.
same thing. Well, that's one of the reasons why in this book, Wilson knows that the Americans need a seat at the table for the armistice and the peace, because these peace never last in Europe. I mean, they have a generational war going back hundreds of years.
They never actually fully settle anything.
Right,
They just
right.
carve things up
Yeah.
and, carry on.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
they let
love the
resentment
fact.
build till the next generation's ready to fight
Yeah.
again.
I love the fact that the provision they made for Iraq and all was based on Gertrude Bell, a female explorer, because they didn't actually know enough about Iraq to figure out, what should happen to
What
it.
they should do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right. So, I mean, the Treaty of Versailles led us right
Straight
into
into World War
War II.
Absolutely.
So, you're right. It would be an important
Again, the
book.
punitive reparations. That was it.
Yeah. And then you can move on to bootlegging.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of all the major events that we can move on to.
Justin's already done one of those. He had a book called The Bootlegger.
Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean you can't write
Yeah.
your own. No, right. So you have found yourself surprisingly caught by Isaac Bell.
It's been a lot of fun. It really has. He's an interesting character, but I like the history. I love finding out how much I don't know about the world in our past. And I mean, it's humbling, but it's an honor to be able to do it. Get in as much detail in these stories as I possibly can. By immersing myself in it, I think it can help the readers get more immersed in it as well.
So you've talked about submarine warfare or naval warfare, but as I remember, World War II, at least in the opening years, they're still cavalry. They're
Oh, yeah.
still horses.
Yeah. Yep.
Mechanized warfare has not taken over.
It starts around 1916 when the first tanks were introduced.
Okay.
And again, it was an industrial sale or industrial war. That again, machine guns, barbed wire, airplanes, submarines. I mean, all the technology that had been available in the Napoleonic time, or even the
Or the airplane, for
Franco-Prussian
example.
War. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a whole new. That's what fascinated me about a techno thriller for this time period, because it was a whole new way of doing things. The way computers had kind of changed and reshaped military warfare in the 80s for Tom Clancy. You had the same thing happening in
And
the,
now
the
we have
20
drones.
Now we have, yeah. I mean, the next level of techno thriller could be about drone warfare. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty soon it'll all be robots and drones
Yeah.
and not actual people, which actually in some respects would be a good thing, except people will end up paying for it
Yeah.
anyway.
One way or the other. Yeah.
Right. So when Isaac is heading for, the trenches,
Mhm.
is part of what you wanted to do in this book to show that
Yes,
transition to
Absolutely.
the mechanization?
Yeah. I mean, actually, this thing interesting. Dirk never corrected me on this. I don't think I've been wrong, but this is the first Clive Cussler book where characters actually in a real war. And all the action scenes and all the books over all the years, it's always been skirmishes of this or evil villain that. But this is an actual character in a war.
Wow.
But yeah, really, just I wanted
that
to.
true?
Yeah.
We're
But again-
assuming that you're some sort of Clive Cussler computer back
Right.
there, just spitting out. Poor Dirk, I know.
I can't remember the title of my last book.
Right. That is, you're
Yeah.
right. I hadn't
Yep.
thought about that.
Yeah, so I knew it was kind of an honor for me to be able to do that. So I want to again make sure I got it as accurate as I possibly could.
Actually, it's always seemed to me that one of the challenges facing a person writing a Cussler is to come up with some kind of, desperate scenario that,
Something has been done before, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're all variations on the theme, though. Whether it's falling off a transporter bridge or some other bridge, or being chased by a car, chased by a tank. This one, being shot down by the Red Baron.
That's true. You could actually, right. I love that. Shot down by the Red Baron. Did you do that?
You didn't finish the book, did you?
Let me tell you the story of this book. This book got air freighted in here Friday because the original order that I sent to the publisher somehow or other got lost.
Oh,
So
wow.
not only did I think I've done pretty well to
I'm impressed.
only I could read fast enough to actually have this conversation. Right. I mean, no matter how good technology is, things can still
Glitch.
go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we have been watching the weather very carefully for the
Make sure I
last
got it.
3 days because, yes. But anyway, it made it. And I do
Yep.
think our if you're watching this, I really think our sales team at Random House, who when the error was pointed out to them, rallied.
Scrambled.
Yeah, no, they were terrific.
Good.
It's just, So no, I didn't. So
And they did a great job with this cover. I love the cover.
I do too. So
Yeah.
let's go back to the Red Baron.
Okay. The story, the setup is Belle wants to see the trenches from above. And so he goes on an observation plane. As they're flying around, the Germans send up a balloon, observation balloon. And these are one of the things that if a pilot saw one, they would attack it instantly because it meant the guys on the ground are to get slaughtered because the observers would tell them the artillery was most accurate. And so the pilot is told to stay on his side of the lines, but he sees the balloon, so he goes across into the German side of the lines to shoot down this observation balloon. While that's happening up above, there's 4 airplanes circling and sees what's going on, comes down to attack. The pilot gets killed in a stunt that only Tom Cruise could pull. Belle gets from the back seat of the plane to the pilot seat of the plane and has a dogfight with the Red Baron.
God, let's wait for the movie.
Right.
I know. It's like Shades of the Olympics. And, wow. Speaking of which, I'm going to pause here and give a slight plug. No offense here. But I have read Jeffrey Archer for years. And I have to say that it was like reading a completely different person. His book, which I'll be talking to him about next Sunday virtually because he's in the UK, only Jeffrey has access, I think, to enough really high-level people to know this. His book is set at the Olympic, London, 2012, and in the book there are 23 security threats that William Warwick and his gold team have to ward off to make sure the Olympics survive. And of those, 13 are real, and 9 he made up. And he doesn't tell you which ones were actual threats that the British were able to quash in time. And I don't know about any of you, but I watched the 2012 Olympics. I was riveted to it. And none of us, I imagine, even thought about.
Had any idea.
Yeah. But
Who's the author again? I missed the...
Jeffrey Archer.
Oh, okay.
He's we have done Zooms before. I
Yep.
may have won his heart because when we first did, the first thing I asked him was when you went to jail, I said, when you were in prison, is that why you wrote the prison diaries? And he sort of, but then we talked. And anyway, I just thought that was such a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But you would have to have
Access to-
context
yeah.
that, and he does, because, he's that kind of guy.
Well, that's something I always
But
fascinating.
what a terrific idea for a book.
Well, fascinating when you go to the International Thriller Writers Association. They get together once a year. I've met for a few years. We start talking to some of these adventure writers, the thriller writers, and like, oh, I'm retired CIA, or I was a black ops specialist on SEAL Team 6, or I was a cop for 20 years. I'm like, at that time, I was a well-educated bartender. That's all I knew, who could lie really well.
Actually, bartending might have been an excellent training ground for being a novelist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Your ear for dialogue would be spectacular, right?
I remember the first meeting we had, it was actually here in Phoenix. And for whatever reason, the bar wanted to close at 10. And you do not tell a bunch of functioning alcoholic authors that we're going to close a bar at 10. We had pitchforks ready to go at them.
So Thriller Fest was actually born 2 years before that at a convention that the Poison Pen hosted.
Really?
Clive was the luncheon speaker.
Okay.
And by chance, all of the authors, all of the authors that were there was Lee Child and Vince Flynn, David Morrell, I'm trying to remember who all, Kathy Reichs, were all thriller
Yep.
writers. So we were all in the bar,
Mhm.
which is on Saturday night at the end of it. And they were unhappy for various reasons with the attention that they were getting, the awards they weren't winning.
From
And it
the
went
mystery
on
writers.
and on and on. And finally, I had an extra drink. And I remember I slammed my glass down on the bar. And I looked at them and I said, so go start your own fucking organization. And there was this deathly hush. And then they said,
That's a
okay,
damn good idea.
we will. Now, Clive was the only person involved in that conference because he was the keynote speaker at lunch. That wasn't in the bar. He didn't do night in the bar particularly. Well, maybe he did earlier, but by this time he didn't do that.
Yep.
So that's why the first meeting came back here. It was a very nice thing for the thriller writers to do.
Yeah.
July at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix for a whole group of writers, nowhere to walk,
Yeah.
can't really go outside. I said to them at the end, I said, it was really nice of you to do that. It was a nice compliment. You don't ever want to come back to Phoenix.
No.
And so they said, okay, we'll just move it to New York.
Moved to New York, yeah.
Right.
I remember when I got to my hotel, I got in the bathroom and there's no toilet. There's just a hole in the floor. It was a nightmare.
Biltmore?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. It was
Wow, it must have been one of their renovations
Yeah.
or something going on.
crazy.
Right. So I'm going to be the thriller legend in 2026.
Oh.
And one of the things there are two things I'm doing. One of which is I turned down their offer of all the money that, they would spend to get me there in the whole
Yep.
bit. And I've created 4 scholarships for authors, not for authors who have not yet gotten published,
Yep.
but for authors who have a contract and have their first book and nobody is there to tell them what to do next.
Okay.
That's what we're really good at because debuts are the thing that we
Yeah, of
have done
course.
best for 36 years. So anyway, so instead there are going to be 4 scholarships because it's such an expensive conference
Yeah.
that it's unlikely that a new author with a contract ready to
Well,
go
yeah,
can
to-
actually afford to go to
to go
Thriller
there, yeah.
Fest. So that's what
Yeah.
that's what we're going to do.
You are going to be there?
I am the
Okay.
Thriller legend.
Okay.
So yes, I will be there.
I will be there next year.
And that's one of the things I asked them if I could put together a panel or two so that we could talk. Most of the attention at Thriller Fest either goes to like John Grisham and Jim Patterson,
Yeah.
who were the legends this last time, or authors not yet published. And there's a gap,
Yeah.
and I want to fill that. So anyway, but I will be addressing the fact that Clive was part of all that.
Okay.
And, if he were
That's a
still
great
there,
story.
he would, well, it's true. My immortal words, right? Go start your own fucking organization, right? But I'd had a lot to drink. But anyway, I mean, it's interesting how one little thing, that you don't even think about at the moment can turn into something amazing. So Jack Carr is going to kick off his book tour again. All of his terminal lists, he has done them here at the Poison Pen on October 5th, Sunday, at 5 o'clock. and David Morrell, who was the first chairman of
Yep.
Thriller Fest and all. And David is coming to share that
Oh, is
event
he?
with Jack. Yeah. It's really going to be exciting. We're going to have it at the church, up, the United Methodist Church. I think we've sold about 300 tickets so far, but
Wow.
I'm really looking forward to it.
That's neat.
And so Jack really sort of exemplifies what you were talking about, the guy who really was a SEAL team
Right,
leader,
exactly.
lots of military
Yeah,
hardware,
Yep.
the whole bit. Whereas David really, was way much at the forefront before Tom Clancy and all,
Yep.
with First Blood, which
Yeah.
then launched the Rambo franchise, because the whole Rambo thing came from David's
Yeah.
first novel.
Yep.
And both of these books are about the Vietnam War. So when Jack and I were texting, he said to me, I'm doing so much research and I'm not sure. And I said, why the hell didn't you just ask me? I said, I know you weren't around then, but I actually lived through the Vietnam War.
I know some stuff, and I know some
was,
people.
Yeah, I was in my 20s,
Yep.
It's hard to, it seems for so many people, that seems so remote. But, for some of us, we were around,
It was
right?
then, yeah.
I know. So I loved it when he said, no, I had to do all this research. And I thought, here I am. Right. So anyway, we digress. Back to Isaac Bell. What would you, I know what I was going to say, the balloon things were really important in the Civil War.
Yes.
There was, before airplanes, the reconnaissance was done by launching balloons. The Montgolfier brothers did the sort of first real commercial balloon flights and everything at the very end of the 1800s.
1700s.
1700s.
I think 1793 or 94, around that time.
Right.
But it was the Civil
18th
War.
century,
Yep,
1700s. Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, the American Civil War is when there's used as for observation
A
on the
lot,
battlefield. Yeah. Yep.
And so I'm not at all surprised that they were deployed during World War II.
World War One, yeah. Yep.
When airplanes were just,
Yeah.
like barely a thing.
And again, the early planes, were used for observation. Dogfighting didn't start until again pilots would start taking up pistols and rifles and just taking pot shots at each other. And they decided, let's put a machine gun on it, and then they found it.
I know. It's hard not to see Snoopy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Snoopy in his fight doing all that.
But again, as the technology evolved, even as the war was raging.
Right, but balloons were really vulnerable
Yeah. Oh,
to
absolutely.
airplanes. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was a war technology that had a pretty brief span.
Yeah, it was all throughout the war, because the one thing that the balloonists had that the pilots didn't was parachutes. Because the pilot at that time, the parachutes were so big and bulky that you couldn't fit into the cockpit of an airplane. But if a plane starts attacking the balloon catches fire, the guys can jump out and parachute to the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you done a balloon flight?
I just did one. I've done dozens. My uncle used to be a balloonist. But we just did one over Napa Valley about a month ago, and it's absolutely spectacular. It was
I
gorgeous.
did my first one in Egypt, flying over, Luxor and all. And then when we were in Siam, I'm trying to remember. Anyway, on the Mekong River cruise, there's a beautiful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where it's all commercial balloon flights. Have any of you been to Albuquerque to see the amazing balloon festival? I think we have one here in Sedona, don't we? Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is.
If it cools down, right?
Excellent point. But it's an interesting. Didn't you think that you don't? If you're used to plane travel, the balloon feels so in many
it's
ways
spectacular.
Yeah, it is, but it also feels like you're kind of buffeted about in a. Well, you can be that way.
A
in
little
an
bit,
airplane,
depends on the
too.
weather. It's interesting because my Uncle Jack, who's just an amazing man, fast cars, fast boats, fast airplanes, anything at speed. He raced Daytona against Dale Earnhardt's father, but he loved the serenity of hot air ballooning. Because when you're flying along with the wind, you don't hear any sound at all. So we used to fly in Vermont and be going over fields and hear the cows mooing up at you or dogs barking at you. It's just so tranquil. I loved it, as did he. It's an amazing thing.
Wonderful. All right. Well, anything else you want to say about the book?
I don't think so. I
All
think I'm
right.
good.
How about questions from the audience then? And you need, or I will repeat them for the camera because otherwise people won't be able to.
Is there taking a bottle of water?
I will do that while you ask for the first question. How's that?
Anybody have any questions? Yes. The tall guy in the back.
Your research is just marvelous, as always.
Thank you.
I guess one of the parts that sort of intrigued me was your research on the Western Front in
Yep.
particular. I love the scene where Bell was
Ah, bless you.
flying in the planes, and you just got a sense of the whole magnitude of the Western Front. So I'm just curious from your research, what things did you learn? What things didn't you know? I mean, World War I's 100 years ago, so everything is second, third hand. I'm just wondering what popped out at you when researching all that.
The one thing I didn't realize is frontline troops were only on the front lines for about a week. And then they're brought back to a rest trench maybe a half mile from the front, and for a week. And then we go back up to the front. And then after a month rotation, they'd go basically on full leave, 15, 20 miles from the front. Because, again, the strain of being on the front line, even if there's no battle going on, there's constant sniping. The Germans had, they called them stormtroopers at the time, they had very elite soldiers that would at night climb out in no man's land, cross into the trenches, the English trenches, the French trenches, kill a bunch of guys, generally grab a couple guys to bring back to their trenches to interrogate. And so the fear of this happening at any moment really broke down morale of the troops. And they couldn't physically stay on the line that long. Now, I had no idea. That's going to assume you get the line, you're there till for a month or 2 months or 3 months or whenever it's over with. So that's one thing I had no idea.
A trench was a really disgusting place to be.
Unbelievable.
And many of them died from things not relating to the Germans, but,
just
disease and all kinds of awful things.
Well, it's like, again, more soldiers in the Civil War died of disease than from bullets. I mean, there's so many, again, the conditions there, and in World War I is even worse. I mean,
Right. World War I was also gave a huge impetus to plastic surgery. There were so many people that had particularly brutal facial injuries. And World War, if I remember right, the Civil War, somebody wrote a really great thriller about it. That's one of the snipers who'd had like most of his face blown off. They created a metal mask for him so that he could kind of go out and function in public. But some of the wounds in World War I were so terrible that even that wasn't. So plastic surgery really got its start.
And then also articulated artificial limbs.
Well, yeah,
Started coming because of
prosthesis
that, yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
right. And of course, nobody really understood PTSD, which they called shell shock.
Shell shock, yeah.
So there were terrible injuries, physical and mental,
Yep.
during that war.
And then throw in the one thing I didn't put in this book, it's just too ghastly, was a gas attack. Because it's so barbaric the way it was done and what it does to the human body. I wasn't going to touch that one.
Excellent idea. Another question?
Sir.
Did Isaac Bell really piss you off in this book because you dragged him through hell?
It's one of those, again, because it takes place in a war, I have so many scenarios to put him into danger. I had so many things I could come up with. And again, there's so much new technology I could throw at him. The tank, and there's a big airplane called the Zeppelin Stockin that I have him on. Again, doing a lot of more Tom Cruise style stunts. But the impetus for this book would kind of kick the whole thing off. As I was watching the original Star Wars, and there's a scene where Harrison Ford's character is like running down the halls of the Death Star, cradling out a blaster, and like, "Wah!" And I thought, what do you Isaac Bell on a neat scene like that? And I thought, what was the early 20th century version of the Death Star? And it's a dreadnought battleship. And so the whole idea is, all right, how do I get Isaac Bell onto a dreadnought? And that's what started the whole book. And then that's when it kicked off my recollection of the techno thriller from 30 years ago. Yes.
So, Mary, his wife,
Yes.
when you write about her, does the story come forth in your head, or it's about, I think, and then you toss her in to fit into that story, or does she play a role sometimes? Does she get you to places that you couldn't get otherwise just with Isaac?
Can you repeat that a little bit?
Yeah, well, like, how do I get Marion involved in the stories? I think for the saboteurs, I'm pretty sure she gets kidnapped in that one. Or there's one version of it she did. But I don't like going to that well too often. 'Cause, I mean, in real life, if your wife got kidnapped, you'd never put her in danger ever again. I mean, so it wouldn't be a thing. I kind of like having her more as someone he can go to talk to as things are getting rough. And this one not so much. It's just she happens to be just traveling with him, to go to England, have some time, in Great Britain. But again, she's like any good spouse. She's the sounding board for him. That's a good idea, that's a bad idea, or just unwind with her. Also, I mean, she's such a kind of a feisty character. She's always great for comic relief. I mean, she's a fun character to write about.
You raise a really interesting point there. Was there any real fear during World War I that Britain was going to be invaded? I mean, it certainly was true during Napoleonic War, and obviously World War II was terrible. But
there's a concern. Of course, Operation Sea Lion was the invasion of England by the Germans in World War II. I don't know if there was or not.
And the reason I brought that up was if there were, she wouldn't be
she wouldn't have stayed
going
there,
along on a vacation. But I can't recall.
I mean, they moved people and kids out of the cities because of the Zeppelin raids. And I don't think they really thought there was going to be an invasion.
No, but I mean, 100 years earlier, during the Napoleonic War, they really were worried about it. They had all kinds of, signal towers built along the coast.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Wasn't aware of
it was a major thing.
I'll research. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I'll find out.
No, it occurred to me if she were going along for vacation, surely nobody was really deeply worried about England becoming a battlefield.
I hadn't heard any, read any things about that being an issue. Because again, I mean, the Germans were pretty much locked behind the battle lines on the Western Front.
I think they all got stuck in the trenches.
Yeah.
Wasn't most of that war fought over like 20 square miles
Basically,
or something
it's like,
in Belgium?
Yeah, it was a 500-mile long line from the Swiss Alps to the North Sea, but the territory back and forth is only like 50 or 60 miles for the entire war. It's ridiculous.
It was one of the worst wars ever. I mean, because nothing
was accomplished,
and nobody would step up and settle it.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, another modern parallel. Did you have an online question over there, Patrick?
Yeah, so Mike on YouTube wanted to know if Ms. Bell makes an appearance, the filmmaker,
Yes.
and what does she like to write? He's really interested to know what your process is to get into her head.
I don't really have a process to get into her head per se. I just, you watch average couples. I mean, think of what I would say to my spouse, or what I have said to my spouse at times. If you question or sound. I mean, it's more. I think she probably is a little bit based off of my late wife. Just our relationship that we had. It was very easy, a lot of banter, that kind of thing. But in terms of the process, I don't think I have one. I hate to say that.
Well, as a bartender and as a people watcher, so to speak, as
Yeah.
a professional people watcher, I think you've got her down pretty well.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I have a hearing loss, and I wear a Cussler. And I just out of curiosity, because I got into the book about Isaac Bell, particularly when his wife learned in one of the books brought back the diagram that developed a projector for film, and she was into making film. And I also noticed that Isaac Bell seems to have a lot of technical.
Yep.
You bring in a lot of wonderful technical stuff coming in it. And an example would be the 1911 Colt 45.
Right.
That was one of the
Yep.
technical advantages. I did do a research to see the development of the hearing aid. And the first of the hearing aids started in 1920.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, maybe you might want to incorporate that device into maybe a Bell story, because that could help him hear.
Give him an advantage over. Yeah.
Further than before.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I'm fascinated by getting the technology that was available then that we think of today. I mean, they had electric scooters in 1915, 1916. And like the D battery you put in a flashlight today is the same D battery they had back in 1910. And I had no idea.
So they could run around in golf carts and we
Basically,
didn't know
yeah.
it?
I mean, the electric, like you see kids running around on those little two-wheel scooters. They had them back then.
I think your point about the hearing aid, though, is terrific.
Yeah.
Excellent thing
Yep,
to
I
be
like that. Thank you.
considering. Anyone else? Well, in that case, whoop, are you
One
coming
more.
back? One more.
One final question online. Will we ever see Kelly Mercer back?
Will we see Philip Mercer back?
Philip Mercer, sorry. Kelly was asking that question. I just
Okay.
combined the names.
The answer is absolutely you will, for sure. The Lighting Stone was actually a 2-book deal, and my publishers have been very patient with me as I've come back into the Cussler fold, and they know I will give them a book at some point in time. When, that's up to Dirk and I guess. But yeah, Philip Mercer will be back.
Excellent news. So, Dirk, I hate to bring this up in a way, but is there any potential film interest? And if there were, would you allow it? Or are we going to maintain Clive's total blockade?
Yeah, no, we're certainly receptive.
We are receptive to the possibility?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
But
if,
it's the problem is trying to ensure the quality.
yes, well, that was your dad's sticking point was, that the quality, you don't have a lot of control over once you write it off.
That's it.
But, much of what, all of you were writing about would really translate very interestingly into film, and especially now with, computer enhanced things and all, you could, I was thinking about Boyd, when you stopped writing the Oregon Files and Boyd wrote them, his last great idea was to sink the Oregon.
Sink the Oregon file,
have them rebuild it, and that would be kind of hard to do, in conventional movie technique, but it'd be really interesting to do it now.
Well, also, I think what's great now is the streaming service is doing like a 10-episode arc, like they're doing with the Jack Reacher novels or Jack Carr's books. That's, these books don't translate into film very well, especially, some of Clive's earlier stuff. There's like 13 different plot points all coming out at the end, and you have to edit all that stuff out. And you lose the essence of the book. But if you can do it, again, like in a TV series, again, with a good production budget, it really lends itself to that way of
No,
storytelling.
it absolutely does, but there are opportunities now to recreate a lot of the, using technology.
yeah.
That would have been hard to do,
Yep.
and think about how Star Wars would be today, if the first one came out all over again. Have they redone? I'm so out of it, I never have time to watch anything. It would be interesting to see the first Star Wars thing redone with modern technology.
No, as long as it's a good story.
Well, but
'Cause
I mean,
the modern,
you know,
the
they did
prequel,
the
the
best-
sequels they did weren't very
No,
visually pretty. Storytelling not so good.
well, that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
But there we are. Well, Jack, thank you so much.
Thank
Glad
you.
you made it. Round
Yep.
of applause for Jack. Hooray. And if you would now like to get your book signed and get photographs and talk to Jack, that would be absolutely wonderful. Did we give you numbers by any chance? Do we have a few? Yes. Okay. John? Did we give out? Sorry? Okay, thank you. I have a couple of things, or at least one thing, that I was going to dig out here.